Amidst the hierarchy of the DC universe, and despite Dwayne Johnson's attempts, Batman and Superman are the most popular characters from that franchise. Batman, Gotham City, and his vast array of villains, who and which are some of the most iconic comic book villains, only rivaled by Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, are cemented in pop culture. His popularity can be attributed to many different things, obviously the comics, films, etc. But regardless, many people would say that Batman is their favorite hero. And one person in particular that definitely seems to be a big Batman fan is Mr. McFarlane himself. Being a Batman fan is great. I'm a Batman fan, you watching are probably a Batman fan, and I don't think it's controversial to say that McFarlane loves Batman. When you have a certain set of popular characters, I think to keep basic monetary momentum, you need to have some of the flagship characters always circulating in markets. In Hasbro's case, it's usually a Wolverine or Spider-Man always releasing either in a new suit or adjacent character, and in McFarlane's case, there's always a Batman somewhere lurking. I mention all this because back in 2023, McFarlane revealed this Knightfall Batman. With the name referencing the Knightfall comic, this Batman sports the corresponding blue and gray design from the comic. Like I said, McFarlane Toys is no beginner to making Batman figures, and there's a plentiful assortment of options predating this specific figure, but I never really gravitated towards any of the previous comic-based Batman figures. But this Knightfall Batman one did catch my interest. He's not overly buff, no enraged face, and a fairly decent cape. There was one important aspect that I just didn't like, which funnily enough is the distinct reason he's probably called Knightfall Batman, the blue and gray. If you watched my Superman video, then you'll know that when I'm looking for action figures, my biggest rule for these comic DC Multiverse figures is my mind's eye of a character. My mind's eye of Batman is not blue and gray, so this Knightfall Batman was not on my radar. But I think more than any other company, repaints is something that McFarlane is not unfamiliar with. Time skip like a year later, I got this Superman figure and thought it was pretty good. So I looked through the McFarlane catalog to see who I can add to my new collection, and to no surprise, I found my mind's eye of Batman. This is the Knightfall Batman, but black and gray. Bravo, McFarlane. You did what I expected, but also what I wanted. So enough preluding. It's time to take a look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman Knightfall Black Suit variants. That's a long name. I just gotta say this first. This figure goes pretty hard. Batman already is pretty raw, but I don't know, this figure just looks cool. This specific mold with Batman, I think captures a fair stature of the character. This is my mind's eye of Batman. And honestly, I think the color scheme is a product of me playing Lego Batman growing up. That's where I learned a lot about the DC universe. Comparing this figure to the original release, the only difference is the color of the mask, trunks, boots, and cape. Obviously there are changes with the corresponding accessories, but interestingly, the card on the original is in color, but this version is black and white. So that's interesting, I guess. But let's move on to articulation, which follows a pretty standard layout. Nothing too crazy, as you get double jointed legs, ankle movement, toe joints, and McFarlane styled upper leg movement. Moving up, there's a ball joint waist that goes back and forth, working as the ab crunch. Then there's the upper diaphragm cut. Something I want to know about the upper diaphragm is the emblem, which does stick out as its own extension, which is pretty cool. For the arms, you get your shoulder movement with a very limited butterfly joint system. It's almost non-existent. Cool bicep swivel, elbows, wrists, and hands as well. For the head sculpt, I think it looks pretty nice. With Batman, obviously he's not going to be smiling, but I also didn't want a face that looks like he's going to beat me to death. This captures a stern face without being too aggressive, if that makes any sense. Finally, we move on to the cape, which is styled in motion, swaying to the side. The cape is made of rubber, so you can't really edit it in any way, but I think as opposed to other cape styles, this position doesn't take up too much space. Moving on to accessories, we have a fine amount, but McFarlane really isn't the one to put a lot of hands or stuff in offerings. Included are two sets of hands, one set of fists and a set of grabbing hands. even though Batman doesn't shoot webs or have any specific hand gestures to include. But I think maybe for crouching poses, some like open palm hands would have been kind of cool. Okay, I was editing this segment and I just saw this Bane Batman 2-pack that actually uses the Knightfall Batman figure with a blue and gray battle damaged version and this big ass Bane. But he actually comes with open palm hands. The final accessory for Batman is his trusty Batarang. I gotta admit, I don't know if this design is from the comics, I'd assume it is, but I'm not a fan of this particular design. I prefer the more sleek and more Batman emblem looking design for a Batarang, and obviously you can use the grabbing hands to hold the Batarang. Very cool. And the final accessories are the always included DC Multiverse display stand and a trading card, with the story of Batman in case you didn't already know that. In the sea of McFarlane Batman figures, I definitely feel like this Knightfall version of the Cape Crusader stands out. Obviously, people can have their preferred color scheme for Batman, and McFarlane graciously offers different assortments, even having variants of a specific colorway. I've been trying to build out a comic-inspired collection, and this Batman looks really good next to Superman. It captures my mind's eye of the characters in action figure form, and seeing these two next to each other is just spectacular. Now that I've got two heroes, maybe next time we get a bit more villainous. It's a slippery slope getting into the DC Multiverse line, and I'm very picky on designs, but this Batman is pretty great. Batman's popularity in pop culture shines brighter than just McFarlane Toys, and there's a plentiful assortment of Batmans from other brands. I specifically want to call out Medicom Mafex Batmans, in which there are a handful of comic-based figures. Specifically, I bring them up because they also made their own version of a Knightfall Batman, being much more comic-inspired, but as such, in my opinion, is less appealing. I don't like the really tall ears, and they look pointy. Instead, I think the Hush Batman version looks cooler. Batman is such a popular character that there's always someone out there who will appreciate a release, even if you personally don't. That's the psychology of action figures. But for now, this McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman Knightfall Black Suit variant is surprisingly nice and a solid offering from McFarlane Toys.